If you can't play, you don't eat. Those 7 words would haunt billionaire Marcus Sterling for the rest of his life. Because what happened next in that Manhattan concert hall didn't just destroy his reputation, it revealed a musical genius who'd been sleeping in subway stations for 6 months. A 22-year-old homeless woman named Sophia Chen had just walked into the most exclusive private concert venue in New York, desperately seeking work. Within minutes, she'd be forced to sit at a $300,000 Bosendorfer piano, fighting for a single meal. But when her fingers touched those keys, the entire room would discover why some talents refuse to die, even when the world tries to bury them alive. Sophia Chen woke up that morning the same way she had for the past 180 days, to the screech of subway brakes and the shuffle of commuters stepping around her makeshift bed. Her fingers, once insured for $2 million by her conservatory, now clutched a cardboard sign. "We'll work for food, any honest job." The irony wasn't lost on her. 2 years ago, she'd been the youngest pianist ever accepted into the prestigious Kaufman Conservatory. Critics had called her the next Martha Argerich. Her interpretation of Rachmaninoff's Third had made seasoned musicians weep. Now she couldn't even afford the subway fare to get to job interviews. Sophia carefully folded her thin blanket, a donation from a kind stranger, and tucked it into her worn backpack alongside her most precious possession, a small, water-damaged photo of her grandmother. The edges were yellowed and torn, but you could still make out the image of a young woman sitting at a piano, her face radiant with joy. "Music chooses you, Xiaoli," her grandmother had whispered on her deathbed, using Sophia's Chinese name. "Even when the world turns away, music never abandons its chosen ones." But music had abandoned her, hadn't it? When her student visa expired and her scholarship evaporated due to a clerical error, when her appeals were denied and her work permit rejected, when she'd been forced to choose between a plane ticket home to face her family's shame or staying illegally to chase an impossible dream, where was music then? Sophia's stomach cramped with hunger. She'd eaten nothing but a half-eaten sandwich from a trash can yesterday. Her hands shook as she tried to smooth down her matted hair, catching her reflection in a store window. When had she become so thin? When had her eyes lost their light? The Sterling Concert Hall loomed before her like a glass and steel monument to everything she'd lost. She'd performed there once, years ago, as part of a young artist's showcase. The memory felt like it belonged to someone else, some other girl who believed talent and hard work were enough. But desperation has a way of making you brave. Or stupid. Sophia wasn't sure which as she pushed through the revolving doors. The security guard's hand was already reaching for his radio when Sophia approached the information desk. She knew how she looked. Homeless, desperate, out of place among the marble floors and crystal chandeliers. But she forced herself to stand straight, to remember who she used to be. "I'm looking for work," she said quietly. "Cleaning, serving, anything. I'm a hard worker." The receptionist, a woman with perfectly manicured nails and cold eyes, didn't even look up from her computer. "We don't hire off the street. Please leave before I call security." "Please," Sophia's voice cracked. "I just need—" "Is there a problem here?" The voice cut through the lobby like a blade. Marcus Sterling himself descended the main staircase, his presence commanding immediate attention. At 48, he was everything American success was supposed to look like. Sharp suit, sharper smile, and eyes that calculated the value of everything they saw. Sophia had read about him in the arts sections of newspapers she'd found in recycling bins. Marcus Sterling, hedge fund billionaire turned arts patron, owner of 3 concert halls, sponsor of young musicians. As long as they came from the right backgrounds, attended the right schools, knew the right people. "This young woman was just leaving," the receptionist said quickly. Marcus studied Sophia with the same expression he might use to evaluate a questionable investment. His gaze took in her unwashed hair, her threadbare clothes, the desperation barely hidden behind her attempt at dignity. "Actually," he said slowly, a smile playing at his lips that didn't reach his eyes, "I might have something for her." Hope flared in Sophia's chest. "Really? I'll do anything. Cleaning, maintenance. I have experience. Can you play?" The question hung in the air like a trap. Sophia's heart stopped. In the corner of the magnificent lobby sat a Bosendorfer 280 VC, one of the finest pianos ever made. Its ebony surface gleamed under the chandelier light, perfect and untouchable. I. Sophia's throat went dry. Marcus's smile widened. It's simple. We're hosting a donors luncheon in an hour, very exclusive, the world's most successful people. If you can play something, anything that impresses them, I'll not only give you a meal, but consider you for a position. And if I can't, then you leave and never come back. And I make sure every venue in the city knows not to let you through their doors. The cruelty was breathtaking, but Sophia's grandmother's photo seemed to burn in her backpack. Music chooses you. I'll play, she whispered. Word spread quickly through the Sterling concert hall. Staff members whispered in corners, some appalled, others morbidly curious. The donors began arriving, tech billionaires, pharmaceutical executives, people who collected tax breaks like baseball cards. Marcus made sure everyone knew what was happening. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced as the elite gathered in the concert hall, we have a special pre-lunch entertainment. This young woman claims she can play. She's betting a meal on it. Marcus, really, murmured Victoria Ashford, heiress to a shipping fortune. This seems rather cruel. Cruel, Marcus's voice carried perfectly in the acoustically designed space. I'm giving her an opportunity. That's more than most would do. Besides, he added, loud enough for Sophia to hear as she approached the piano, everyone should know their place, don't you think? Sophia's legs felt like water as she walked to the Bosendorfer. The piano was even more magnificent up close. $300,000 of Austrian craftsmanship, maintained to perfection. Her reflection in its polished surface looked like a ghost. The donors settled into their seats, some pulling out phones to record what they assumed would be a disaster. Marcus stood near the stage, arms crossed, satisfaction radiating from every line of his body. Whenever you're ready, he called out. Though I should mention, we have some rather accomplished musicians in our audience today. Dr. Harrison there is on the board at Juilliard. Mrs. Yamamoto studied under Rubinstein himself, so please don't waste our time with chopsticks. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Sophia sat on the bench, her hands trembling. She hadn't touched a piano in 6 months. Her fingers were stiff from cold nights, calloused from menial labor. What if she'd lost it? What if muscle memory wasn't enough? She closed her eyes and heard her grandmother's voice. The piano remembers, even when we forget. Sophia placed her hands on the keys. The first note she played silenced the room. It wasn't timid or uncertain. It was pure, clear, and filled with such longing that Victoria Ashford's champagne glass stopped halfway to her lips. Sophia had chosen Chopin's Ballade number, one in G minor, a piece that demanded not just technical skill, but emotional maturity. It was the piece she'd played at her grandmother's funeral, the last time she'd felt whole. The opening passages flowed from her fingers like water finding its course after a drought. The piano responded to her touch as if recognizing a long-lost friend, its voice filling the concert hall with sounds so beautiful it seemed impossible it could come from someone who looked so broken. Marcus's smirk began to fade. This wasn't what he'd expected. This wasn't some desperate amateur fumbling through a half-remembered tune. This was, my God, whispered Dr. Harrison, that's professional level playing. But Sophia was just getting started. As the ballad built in complexity, her playing revealed layers of interpretation that spoke of years of advanced study. Her phrasing was exquisite, her dynamics perfectly controlled. She wasn't just playing the notes. She was telling a story of loss, hope, and the unbreakable human spirit. The donors sat transfixed. Mrs. Yamamoto, who hadn't cried in public in 30 years, felt tears sliding down her cheeks. A tech billionaire who'd been checking his phone slowly lowered it, his mouth open in wonder. Marcus stepped backward, his face draining of color. He recognized this level of playing. He'd paid millions to bring artists of this caliber to his venues. How was this possible? As Sophia navigated the ballad's treacherous coda, her technique flawless despite months without practice, something extraordinary happened. The music transformed the concert hall into a sacred space. Every person present felt it, the undeniable presence of true artistry. The final notes rang out with devastating beauty. Sophia held them, letting them die naturally in the perfect acoustics of the hall. Silence. Then, like thunder after lightning, the room exploded. Dr. Harrison was on his feet, applauding with tears streaming down his face. "Brava!" he shouted. "Brava!" The entire audience rose as one, their applause shaking the chandeliers. Several people were openly weeping. Others pulled out their phones, not to mock, but to share the miracle they just witnessed. "Who are you?" Victoria Ashford called out over the applause. "Where did you study?" Sophia stood slowly, swaying slightly from hunger and emotional exhaustion. "My name is Sophia Chen. I was a scholarship student at Kaufman Conservatory until—" Her voice broke. "Until I lost everything." The applause died as her words sank in. This wasn't just a talented pianist. This was one of their own, someone who'd been trained at the highest levels, now reduced to begging for work. "That's impossible," Marcus said, his voice sharp with something like panic. "Kaufman doesn't just lose students. If you were really—" "She was my student." The voice came from the back of the hall. An elderly man with silver hair stood up, his face grave. Professor Dmitry Volkov, one of the most respected piano teachers in the world, walked slowly toward the stage. "Sophia was the most gifted student I've taught in 40 years, he said, his accent thick with emotion. "When her visa issues began, I tried to help. But the system—" He shook his head. "We failed her. The conservatory failed her. I failed her." He turned to face the audience, his voice rising. "This young woman won the Van Cliburn amateur competition at 17. She performed with the Philadelphia Orchestra at 19. She was destined for greatness, and we let bureaucracy and indifference destroy her career." The silence that followed was deafening. Every person in that room had to confront an uncomfortable truth. They'd been ready to mock someone who possessed more talent than most of them would encounter in a lifetime. Marcus Sterling stood frozen as his carefully orchestrated humiliation crumbled around him. The homeless woman he'd intended to embarrass had just delivered one of the finest performances ever heard in his concert hall. Worse, she'd done it while starving, exhausted, and broken by a system he'd helped create and maintain. "Mr. Sterling," Dr. Harrison's voice was ice cold, "I believe you owe Miss Chen more than a meal." The crowd murmured agreement, their earlier amusement transformed into anger at what they'd witnessed. Several people were already pulling out checkbooks and business cards. But it was Professor Volkov who took charge. "Sophia," he said gently, "would you honor us with one more piece? Something of your own choosing?" Sophia looked at her former teacher, then at the crowd of people who'd been ready to laugh at her failure. She thought of all the nights she'd slept in subway stations, all the meals she'd missed, all the times she'd been invisible to people just like them. "I'll play," she said quietly, "but first, I want everyone to understand something." She turned to face the audience fully, her chin raised despite her ragged appearance. "There are thousands of people like me in this city. People with gifts, with training, with dreams. People who fell through cracks they didn't create. You walk past us every day. We're invisible to you until someone forces you to see us." Her gaze found Marcus. "You wanted to teach me a lesson about knowing my place. But my place isn't determined by my circumstances. It's here, at this piano, sharing the gift I was born with." She sat back down and began to play. This time she chose Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor, a piece of such power and darkness that it seemed to channel every moment of suffering she'd endured. The music that poured from the Bosendorfer was raw, honest, and devastating. It spoke of nights spent hungry, of dreams deferred but not destroyed, of the unbreakable dignity of the human spirit. Several donors were sobbing openly. Others sat in the stunned silence, forced to confront their own complicity in a system that could allow such talent to nearly disappear. When the last note faded, nobody applauded. They couldn't. The music had stripped them bare, revealed truths they'd spent lifetimes avoiding. Marcus Sterling sank into a chair, his face in his hands. In trying to humiliate someone he'd deemed beneath him, he'd instead revealed his own moral bankruptcy to everyone who mattered in his world. "Miss Chen, Victoria Ashford stood, her voice steady despite her tears. I run a foundation that supports displaced artists. We're going to fix this. Today. Within minutes, Sophia was surrounded by people offering help. Real help, not charity. Job offers, housing assistance, legal aid for her visa issues. Professor Volkov was already on the phone with Kaufman's president, demanding her immediate reinstatement with full scholarship. But perhaps the most significant moment came when a young woman approached hesitantly. She was one of the servers, someone who'd been invisible to the donors just as Sophia had been. I studied violin, she whispered, before things went wrong. Watching you today. Maybe there's still hope. Sophia took the girl's hands in hers. There's always hope. Music doesn't abandon us. Sometimes we just need someone to remind us we're worth listening to. The headline in the New York Times arts section read, "From homeless to Carnegie Hall, Sophia Chen's triumphant return." But Sophia's real triumph wasn't her sold-out debut or her recording contract with Deutsche Grammophon. It was the Invisible Artists Foundation she'd established with the settlement money from her lawsuit against the immigration system that had failed her. The foundation operated out of the Sterling Concert Hall. Marcus Sterling had quietly donated the building before disappearing from public life entirely. Every week, musicians who'd fallen through society's cracks came to play, to be heard, to remember who they were beneath their circumstances. Professor Volkov, serving as artistic director, insisted on one rule: no one was turned away for their appearance. Talent was the only currency that mattered. On the wall of the main rehearsal room hung a simple plaque: music chooses you. Even when the world turns away, music never abandons its chosen ones. Chen Meiling, 1935 to 2019. And in the corner, always tuned and ready, sat the Bosendorfer piano, where Sophia Chen had proved that sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the places we refuse to look. The next time you pass someone on the street, someone whose circumstances have made them invisible, ask yourself what gifts might be hidden beneath their struggles. What symphonies are we silencing with our assumptions? At Acts of Depth, we believe every person carries a song worth hearing. The question is, are we brave enough to listen? Subscribe to hear more stories of hidden dignity and revealed truth, because sometimes the most powerful performances happen when we least expect them. Remember, talent doesn't know zip codes, genius doesn't check bank accounts, and music, real music, doesn't care what you are wearing when you play it. What song is waiting inside you?